Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to be doing a recap of a couple of games that I played here in the Tata Steel Rapid and Blitz in Kolkata, India. Now, as you guys may know, I did not do a recap yesterday. In fact, I started off very poorly with 1 draw out of 3 games. Now, some of you might be thinking that, well, I didn't do a recap simply because I had a bad day. The actual answer is that yesterday I was dealing with severe jet lag from traveling so far from the United States, and really, as soon as I got back to the hotel, I simply passed out and fell asleep. Now, that would be all nice and fine, but there's much more to the story. Now, after I fell asleep at about 8 p.m. local time, I then woke up around 2:50 local, which was approximately 10 minutes before Title Tuesday started. As such, being awake, having slept about 5.5 to 6 hours, I decided to play in the event. Now, after my poor results yesterday, I really was trying to get off to a good start, see how I could do, sort of turn it all around. Now, on Title Tuesday, I started off very poorly. I had a couple of draws very early on. When all was said and done, I actually played myself into the tournament, and in the final round, I had white against Vladimir Fedoseev. Now, in a very topsy-turvy game, I was better, then worse, maybe losing, and then I was winning again. But at the end of the day, I made a couple of critical mistakes in the key moments of that game, and I did lose the final game of Title Tuesday. And I was not very happy. I felt like I wasn't playing well online, did not play well in the event yesterday, and what to do. So like any insane person, I decided to go on and play Blitz on chess.com for another 5 hours. And I actually got my rating from about 3130 back to 3200 when all was said and done. And then I decided to go to bed around 11 a.m. and I slept until the bus took us to the playing site here at the National Library in Kolkata. Without further ado, we'll jump into the games now that I played today. So in the 4th round, I started with the white pieces against the leader of the event, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, who had 3 out of 3. So the game starts, I play knight f3, knight to f6, e3, and he goes g6, b3, bishop g7, bishop to b2, and now he plays this move c5. Now, in the post-game interview, which I was doing along with a couple of my colleagues, as well as the famous 5-time world chess champion Vishy Anand was mentioning that he was hoping that we would get this line with castles d4, c5, which is a blunder, because after pawn takes pawn, queen a5, c3, queen takes c5, bishop to a3, white ends up winning a pawn on e7 here. Now, what Vishy was referring to was a tournament that was played in Leuven in the Grand Chess Tour in 2018. Now, in that tournament, on the final day of the Blitz portion, I won in this specific variation no more than 3 times. I won with this against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov himself, Anish Giri, and I believe also Wesley So, if I'm not mistaken. And so Vishy was hoping this would happen. Of course, Shakhriyar learned from that game, and he played this move c5 right away, trying to prevent d4. So the game continues with c4, castles, and now I play bishop to e2, b6, castles, bishop b7, and now I played this move queen c2, trying to be original. What I probably should have done in retrospect if I wanted to follow up with rook d1 and d4 is I probably should have gone queen to c1 here, so that after knight to c6, rook d1, let's say black plays d5 here, I can play d4, I can also take as well. And the difference between this and the game is that when I put the queen on c2, knight c6, rook d1, d5 takes, now black has this move, knight to b4, attacking the queen on c2 as well as the pawn on d5. Of course, if my queen was on c1 here in this position after d5, or sorry, not d6, d5 takes and knight b4, now maybe I can even play d4 here, maybe I can play knight c3 followed by d4, and white should be doing very well. But in the game, unfortunately, there's this tempo on the queen. I have to waste time with queen c1. Shakhriyar takes with the queen, I play knight c3, queen to f5, I go d4, now he plays rook a8, and I take here. And in this critical moment, Shakhriyar used a bit of time before playing bishop takes f3. Now, during the game, when he was initially thinking, I thought that after bishop takes f3, bishop f3, knight d3, I could simply play e4, and I was much better after takes, rook c5, and bishop a3, which does occur in the game. However, when this move was played, bishop takes f3, I thought for a bit, because I realized to my horror, after I take and knight d3 is played here, if I don't play e4, I can play something like queen d2 maybe, but after takes, and queen c5, black should be completely fine here. Now, mind you, white is still okay after rook a c1, for example, but at the end of the day, considering my start and the result I had, I felt that I could play this move e4 because I would end up in a situation where it was 50-50 or a coin flip, because after takes, knight c1, rook c1, black has only one move here to maintain the balance with this move, bishop to a6. Now, as I said, I saw this move when I was considering whether or not to play e4, but I figured, you know what, you gotta go for it, and hopefully Shakhriyar will play the very natural looking rook takes pawn, because this is, of course, the very obvious move that you expect to be played. However, after this move, bishop takes h6, the reason black is fine is that if I go rook c2, after rook takes c5, if I play bishop a3 and rook c7 here, you'll notice that this pin is very annoying. I cannot move my knight because then I would lose the rook, and black is threatening to just double stack the rooks on the c file and win the knight on c3. So Shakhriyar had played bishop h6. I had kind of resigned myself to the fact that I was going to go rook b1, rook takes c5, knight to e2, and I felt that I should be able to draw this game pretty easily, but there would be zero chances of winning. However, the gods smiled on me after they really did not smile on me yesterday, and Shakhriyar did in fact play the mistake with rook takes c5. Now I go bishop a3, plays rook g5. If black plays rook c7 here now, I can go knight to b5 because my rook on c1 is guarded, whereas with bishop h6, the rook would have been undefended on c2. So Shakhriyar plays rook g5, I go king f1, he plays rook e8, and now I go rook to c2. Now this move is maybe not the best move, but the reason I played it is very simple. I wanted to move my knight to e2 and infiltrate either on c7 or d7. Now as you'll notice, the knight on f6 covers the square on d7, so my idea was to infiltrate with rook c7. However, if I play knight e2 right away, black can play rook a5, attacking the bishop, and when I move the bishop, there's rook takes a2, and black is simply up a pawn. So therefore, I played this move rook c2 because I figured now I can play knight e2, and after black plays a move like, let's just say black plays h5, for example, and I go knight e2. Now rook a5 does not really have the same bite to it because the rook on c2 guards the pawn, so I can go bishop b4, and after rook b5, I go bishop d2. Same idea to infiltrate. I also can now double stack the rooks on c2 and c1 as well. So I played rook c2, Shak plays rook h5, I go king g1, and now he plays bishop to f8, I go knight to e2, opening the c file so that I can play rook c7, and now he plays rook a5, bishop b4, rook b5, and I go bishop d2. Now the reason that I do this is very simple. I want to reroute the bishop. If you look at the bishop here on this diagonal, right here from a3 to f8, there isn't really much going on because the e7 pawn is very well guarded. And so how do I put the bishop on a better diagonal? So by going to d2, the idea is to play bishop e3. And now if I just play some random moves that don't really have any meaning to them, you'll notice that in this position, with the rook now on c7, there are a lot of problems. The a7 pawn is weak, and also the bishop on e3 is eyeing both of these pawns on the diagonal as well. So Shak plays rook c5 here, I trade, I trade, and now I play bishop c3. Now during the game, I felt very happy about this move because I thought that after bishop e3, which is a computer move by the way, that black can play e6 here, and after say rooks to c1 and knight to d7, I thought black is okay here. There's maybe knight e5, there's also rook c8. But the computer in fact thinks that in this position I can play knight to c3, and after rook to c8 I can just go e5, knight to h5, and then knight to e4. Now during the game I was not really confident about this for a couple of reasons. First of all, I thought there was maybe bishop g7, and after f4 there might be a bishop h6 move which would put pressure on the pawn on f4. Computer says that after knight f6 white is probably technically winning, but it's very, very hard to see from a distance, and with the tower of power here on the f file, it's very hard to think that this is winning, although computer thinks that it's just very simple. So in this position, bishop e3 is actually the best move, but I thought bishop c3 made more sense for the simple fact that now black cannot play e6, and I always want to play e5 here. So just to illustrate the point, I'd love to play something like bishop c1, let's just say h5, and go e5, knight h7, and rook to d7 here. And now with this very active rook on the 7th, this should be technically winning for white. However, if I play bishop e3 and e6 is played in this variation that I just showed, the problem is I can never really go e5 because then black is knight d5, and I didn't really see how to progress. So by playing bishop c3, I thought this was a very nice move because now I can go e5 and rook d7. Additionally, black cannot play e6 here with the idea of meeting e5 with knight d5 because then you would lose your knight on f6. So Shak plays rook c8, now I go e5, knight to e8, rook to d7, following up with my plan to infiltrate on the 7th rank. a6 is played, I go rook a7, and now Shak plays this move rook c6, which is a mistake. During the game, I was actually very unsure how big of an advantage I would have if he played a move like c4, because after takes rook a6, white has an extra a pawn here, but with the double f pawns and potentially the weak pawn on e5 and the easy access to d5 for the knight via c7, I wasn't really convinced how much this was, and the computer in fact thinks that black is completely fine. Instead, Shak plays the human-looking move, rook to c6, guarding the pawn on a6. Worth noting, knight c7 is not good because I have bishop to a5. However, even in this line, after knight e6 takes and c4, I was not sure how much better I was. At any rate, he tries to hang on to the material with rook c6. I go rook to a8. He plays knight g7. I go knight f4 here, and now he plays e6. Now, in this position, black could try something like knight to f5, but for a human it looks very, very scary after knight d5, because you can't really play e6 because of knight f6. And if you go king g7, there might be an e6 with a discovery. Also, white can try to bring the king towards the queen side as well, so it just feels very difficult to play. So Shak plays e6, stopping my knight from jumping to d5, and now I play knight g2, which is not 100% precise, but it's probably good enough. Knight f5 is played, I go knight to e3, and now Shak takes on e3 here. He could have played a move like knight to d4, but in this position, after king g2, guarding the pawn, not f4 by the way, because of the fork on e2, but after king g2, king to g7, and knight c4, I'm completely blockading the pawn, pushes c4, and with this weak pawn on a6, long term it feels like white should be technically winning. Again, not super easy to prove, but just to illustrate a line, let's say black plays h5, I'll go f4. Let's just say you play king g8. I can play bishop a5, king g7, and eventually bishop b6, winning the pawn on a6. So that's just one sample line. Of course, it would not work out quite like that, but nonetheless, these are the ideas that white has. So here Shak takes on e3. Now, again, as I said, technically this is already probably lost, but I feel that after taking on e3, the biggest problem with this move is that black will never get any counterplay to stop some very simple ideas on the queen side. So I take with the pawn, king g7, king f2, he goes c4. Again, almost an only move. You can try bishop e7, but eventually I'm going to go king e2, followed by king d3 and c4, just to illustrate the point. Let's just say we get to this position, h5, h3 is played. Black just really doesn't have anything. If you try to go king f5, I have rook a7, winning either the bishop on e7 or the pawn on f7. And if you go g4, it's really not much better, because I can just take and then play rook g8 check to win the pawn on g4. So black really has no counterplay here, regardless of what he does. Shak does play c4 here. I go b4, of course. I cannot trade the pawns. He plays bishop e7. I go king to e2, just to sort of move that improves my position. I want to get the king closer to prevent the c pawn from going down the board eventually. Plays h5. I go rook to b8 here. He goes g5, and now I play h3. Now the reason behind rook b8 is very simple. I would love to play a4 here, but after rook b6, I can't guard the pawn on b4. Mind you, this is still probably winning after b5 takes and bishop d4, rook b7 and a5, but why do you want to allow any of this to happen? So I play rook b8, he goes g5, I go h3, just stopping g4, king g6, and now I play a4, and again, there's no rook b6 here because the rook on b8 prevents it, and black is essentially lost here because I can create either an outside passed a pawn or a protected passed b pawn going up the board as well. Shak plays rook c7, I go rook b6, rook d7, and now I play rook c6. Really the last gasp here to try and find some counterplay. If I take on a6 after rook to d3, bishop d2, white is still better here, but black is going to get some counterplay with rook a3 followed by c3, and while this is winning, there's no need to allow it. So I play rook c6, and now if black goes rook d3 attacking the bishop, I just take the pawn, I guard the bishop, and this is very simple. So he plays king f5, I take, he goes rook b7, play king d3. Again, no real counterplay here for black. You can't really push the pawn to g4. You can't really play f6. You can't do anything with a pawn, so it's simply a lost position. Shak plays bishop f8, I go a5, bishop e7, king c2, and here he resigns because there really is no hope. Black can maybe try something like bishop f8 again, but now there are multiple ways to win. This is just one example. It's not even the best way, but rook b6, rook c6 takes, and then I have rook b6 here, takes bishop c5, and I can go b7, bishop a7, and just slowly walk the king up the board, win the a pawn with this b pawn on b7, forcing the bishop to stay on this diagonal between a7 and b8. It's completely hopeless for black. Now there's just one line. There are many other ways to win as well, but it just shows how hopeless this position truly is. So Shak resigns, and with that I go from having half out of 3 to 1.5 out of 4. Now in the 5th round I had a very boring draw against Vidit Gujrati from India. Our first game here in India since that famous meme game where he hung his king. He put his king right next to my king. So we drew in the 5th game, and now we'll move on to the 6th game where I had the white piece against Parham Maghsoodloo from Iran. So game starts with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop to b4, all very standard. And now in this position, I choose to play this move pawn to e3. He castles here, and now I play the move bishop to d2, which I played in the Chess Global Championship as well against David Demara. We get c5, knight f3, b6, bishop d3, bishop b7, a3, takes, and now here he takes on d4, which is the correct move. Those of you guys who are following the Chess Global Championship, I had this position against David Navarro, and he actually blundered by going knight e4 here, and after bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, pawn takes pawn, and queen d6. I had an overwhelming position. I would go on to win a very, very smooth game in the first game of, I believe, the second match of the Chess Global Championship against the Czech player David Navarro. So he takes, I take, he plays d5 here. Now I have to go b3. If I castle, for example, after takes, and knight d5, this is what we call the isolani, or the isolated pawn position, where black is a knight blockading this pawn on d4, and you do not want to allow this. So I play b3 here, so that if black takes, I can take back with the pawn, and the knight will not be able to go to d5. So he goes a5, and now I play this move a4 after a bit of a think. Initially, I wanted to castle, but here black can play a4, ruining the pawn structure. And I could probably take the pawn, but after pawn takes pawn, bishop takes, and knight to d5. Again, with this outpost here, and the double pawns on a3 and a4, it doesn't really feel all that special. So I play a4 here, preventing a4, and this way the pawn on b3 is stabilized here, and I can always capture back on c4. We get knight bd7, castles, rook c8. I play bishop to b2, moving the bishop off of this c5. We get queen c7. I go rook e1, rook fd8, and now here I make a mistake and I play this move rook c1. What I should have done here is I should have played this move h3. Now, on first glance, it might not make a whole lot of sense, but there's a very simple reason, which is that, let's just say I play, I'll just play a random move to illustrate the point. After bishop f1 takes, black has moves like queen f4. There are also moves like knight g4 here, threatening to take the knight on f3 and create a checkmate on h2. And if I have to go g3 with this diagonal, it feels kind of scary. Now, in this exact position, white is okay, but there are a lot of ideas where black is going to either be playing queen f4 or knight to g4, and you have to be very, very careful. So if I had played h3 here, I probably would have maintained a bit of an advantage, because now if black plays a move like queen f4, just to illustrate the point, I can play something like rook e3. There's no knight g4 because h3 stops it, and white is definitely better here. I can then play rook c1 or even queen e2 and rook e1 with a legendary triple stack, and the computer really likes it. Instead, I play rook c1 sort of on autopilot, and this is a mistake, because now after pawn, takes, and queen f4, I end up having to play this move rook b1. Now, computer, I guess, thinks bishop f1 is apparently okay, although I was actually very worried about this move knight to g4. Again, same problem, that I can't go g3 because I lose the knight. I can't go h3 because after takes, I would get checkmated like Vladimir Kramnik did against the computer. I think it was Hydra back in like 2004, where there's a queen h2 checkmate, although in that game, Kramnik was black and it was a mate on h7. Regardless, I think you guys get the point. So here I play rook b1. Now, computer actually thinks after bishop f1, knight g4, I guess I have d5 here, and apparently I'm better, but very hard to play this in a rapid or blitz game because it's a very committal move, and without 20 minutes to think, you don't really want to make such decisions unless you know exactly what is happening. So instead I play rook b1 here, and now h6 is played by Parham, and I think this was a mistake. What I feel like Parham should have done is I thought he should have actually just traded down into this endgame, and it's kind of interesting because I would have gotten two isolated pawns on f2 and f3, just like in the game against Shaq. However, in this position, after a move like knight to f8, even though I have the double op combo with the two bishops, and I can play a move like bishop a1, putting pressure on the pawn on b6, I think that after rook d6 here, followed by knight d7, b6 is not really that much of a weakness, and I think that neither side really can do a whole lot, and it probably should end in a draw. However, Parham plays this move h6, and when he played this move, I started to realize that what Parham wanted was he did not want sort of a boring quote-unquote draw. He wanted something that was very active with a lot of piece play for both sides. So I play bishop c1, he goes queen c7. Now black cannot take the knight on f3 because then I will take the queen on f4, and in this position with my pawns on f2 and g2 versus the doubled pawns and the bishop pair, white should be doing very, very well. So after bishop c1, he goes queen c7. I play h3 now, stopping any of these knight g4 ideas. He plays knight to b8. I go bishop b2, and now he goes back to d7. Now, as you'll notice, I've wasted some tempos earlier. I played rook c1 back to b1, but now Parham plays knight b8, bishop b2, knight d7, and essentially Parham has wasted the tempo as well. And at this point, I was feeling very, very confident about my position. So here I play knight d2. Computer likes rook e3 for whatever reason. Don't ask me why. I suspect it's probably related to being able to play knight d2, rook g3, and some d5 down the road. But at any rate, I thought knight d2 was a very human move, very logical move too, because now I guard the pawn. There are no ideas with bishop f3. And later on, I'm always trying to play d5 and open up the diagonal. Additionally, the knight guards the pawn on c4, and the bishop on b2 guards the pawn on d4. So I think white should be better. So we get queen f4, I go knight to f1 here. Again, computer really likes rook e3. Don't ask me why. So I go knight f1, queen g5 is played. I play knight g3, stop in the checkmate on g2. He goes bishop a6. I go queen e2, queen f4, knight back to f1. Now at this point, I wasn't 100% sure what I was doing, but I thought that with him having played bishop a6, now it's very weird for a human to put the bishop back on b7. And I can again reroute the knight either to d2 or e3. So knight f8 is played, I go knight to e3, Parham plays knight c6, and now I make a slight mistake. I play this move knight c2. At this point, what I probably should have done is I probably should have gone g3, but after queen c7 and d5 here, knight to e5, for whatever reason, I simply forgot that I could take and then play rook takes b6, winning the pawn and essentially winning the game. Had I realized that I had this idea, I almost certainly would have played this, because one of the other lines that I was considering during the game was d5. But after knight to b4, g3, queen g5, h4, and queen h5, I simply did not see how I could maintain the advantage. Now, computer, I guess, thinks that after takes, bishop e2, knight f6, takes, and bishop c3, white is much better. But in a rapid or blitz game where the time is getting low, it's very hard to do this when, if we look at this position right here, I have the two bishops, I've got nice pawns in the center, and it's a very, very committal decision. In a classical game where I could think for 20 minutes, I think there's a very good chance I would have played g3 or d5 here. But in a rapid game where I'm down, I think I was down to maybe 6, 7 minutes, maybe a little bit more. Such a decision that's so committal. If I'm right, it's great, but if I'm wrong, I have nothing. And black's moves are all very, very obvious. So I decided to play knight c2 instead, guarding the pawn at d4, but also stopping black from playing knight to b4 potentially. So he goes queen d6, I play bishop c3, and now he plays this move knight b4, which is a blunder. Computers, because they're so much better than we are, shows that there's this amazing resource, knight to e5. If I take with a queen, after takes here, let's say I take with a rook, bishop takes c4, I'm in a lot of trouble here because of the bishops and the knight. If I play something like knight e1, he trades and wins the bishop on c3. And if I take the bishop on c4 after rook takes c4, I can't guard both the bishop and the knight. If I play rook b3, for example, black simply goes rook d c8. I'm going to lose either the bishop on c3 or the knight on c2. If I try to guard with rook e3, there's knight d5 with the fork, and that would be game over. Now, in a rapid or blitz game, very hard to find such a move. If he had played this move, probably what I would have had to do is take with the pawn after rook d3, ef6, rook c3, knight to e3. This actually, sorry, do I have this wrong? Sorry, after takes. No, sorry, I should play rook b6, not e takes f6. And after rook takes c3, I take, rook takes c4, and the game will eventually end in a draw. Probably an illustrative line would be check, king h7, takes, rook takes a5, and then rook to a2. Just say rook f1, takes, and we get a classic rook in 3 versus rook in 3, which would obviously be a draw. Instead, he plays knight b4, which is just a blunder, because after takes, I do not have to take the pawn right away. If I play knight takes b4, for example, here, after bishop b7, knight to c2, black has a move like queen c6 here, hitting both the pawn on a4 and threatening checkmate in 1. White is still better after a move like f3, but it's not 100% clear how I'm going to improve the position. And all these pawns are sort of a little bit looser. Ideas like bishop a6 down the road, a4 is loose. I can't really move the knight because d4 becomes weak, and I wasn't sure what's going on. Fortunately for me, I realized that in this position, I do not have to rush. I do not have to play knight b4, nor do I have to play rook b4, because what I suspect Parham was expecting was rook takes b4, where he has this nice little tactic with knight d5. I have to take, and then you have rook takes c2, removing the knight, which guards the rook on b4. And apparently here I can play check, king h8, queen takes c2, queen takes b4, and rook b1, and it's still a little bit better for white. Again, in a classical game, maybe you can even find a line like this. Computer likes white's position, but in reality, that's not practical. And as I realized during the game, I can actually just quietly sidestep with rook d1 first, and then take. Because the problem with this line after rook takes b4, knight d5 takes, and let's say I take with the queen takes b4. The problem here is that my rook on e1 is on pre. It's under attack, and it's free. But in the game, when I play rook d1, black cannot go after the pawn on c4 or the pawn on d4, and I'm simply going to capture next move. Say black plays a move like king h8, rook takes b4, knight d5. Now, it does not work, so after takes, rook takes c2, queen takes c2, queen takes b4. There's no rook on e1, so I would take the bishop, and if he does the order with bishop takes d3, takes, and rook takes c2, there probably are several ways to play this, but even just a simple one like queen c2, queen takes b4, and d takes a6. I have an extra pawn. Mind you, it's not clear cut, but something like this would probably be good. I can also play something like queen b3 as well, which should be strong. At any rate, these ideas don't work as well with the rook on d1 versus e1. So he goes bishop b7, now I take, rook a8, and now I go rook db1, stacking the rooks on the b file. And at this point, black has clearly lost the opening phase, and I would say the middle game phase. I'm simply up a pawn, and now there are other problems for black, like the weak pawn on b6, and ideas like c5 as well. So he goes knight d7 here. Now this loses the game on the spot, but it's already very hard to play. A move like queen b7 takes and bishop c6. White is still only a little bit better here, but after a move like queen e3, bishop takes a4, knight to e1, I keep my pawns in the center, and I should have a lasting advantage. Mind you, it's not completely winning, which is why he should have done this. Instead, he plays knight d7. Now I go c5 here. He plays queen c6, which is probably not the best. He probably should take on c5, but after pawn takes, queen takes bishop, we trade the queens, c takes b6. With the two passed pawns here on a4 and b6, with ideas like knight e3, knight c4, knight c6, or knight a5, it should be winning. I did not see a clear win on the spot here, but I assumed that this had to be good. Instead, he plays queen c6, attacking the pawn on a4 again and threatening mate in 1. But now I can play this move f3, and now everything falls apart on the spot. Because if you play rook takes a4, I can now go bishop to b5, rook takes rook, knight takes rook, let's just say queen c7, and now I have c6 with the fork of the bishop on b7 and the knight on d7, and the game is over. So he plays queen c8, but now I take the pawn on b6. I'm simply up 2 pawns, and black really has no counterplay. Knight f6 is played by Parham. I go knight to e3, stopping knight d5. He plays queen b8, queen f2, queen f4, and now I go bishop f1. Now this is maybe not the absolute best move, but it's a very simple move because if black plays rook takes c4, I can go knight d5, rook takes b4, rook takes b4, queen e5, takes, actually, sorry, I put the queen on f5, which would lose, but say queen e5 takes, and now I can play a move like queen c5, followed by a5 and a6, or even queen d4 as well. And long term, this should be winning with the 2 connected passed pawns on the a and b files. So he plays queen g5, I go rook b5, queen f4, rook b4, queen g5. Of course, I'm not going to take the draw, and now I play h4, queen g6, rook to c1, trying to infiltrate on the c file and put pressure on the bishop on b7. Knight to e8 is played. I go rook c5 here. Now this move is very simple. I just want to go a5 and a6. The only thing that I can't do here is I can't advance the a pawn. If I can get this a pawn to a5, even a6, it'll be a very simple win. So queen f6 is played. I go a5. He goes queen e7. Rook takes d4, lose because I have knight g4. And then he will have to sack the rook for the knight. And after rook takes, it's over. If you go like queen e7, I just take with the queen, and that's GG as well. So queen e7 is played. I go knight to c4, rook to d5, and now I play rook b1, which is not the best. So probably rook a4 would have been a little bit cleaner here, because now I can move the knight to e5 or e3 and then just follow up with a6. But instead I play this move rook to b1, queen to d8 is played, and now I play rook a1. I give up a pawn. Now this is not really what I wanted to do, but at the end of the day, it's still really, really good with these 2 passed pawns. So I go knight to e5, rook to d1 is played. I found this move, knight c6. Very important move, by the way, because after rook takes d1, queen takes d1, while this is winning, it's not 100% clear how you win, because if I go a6, he can just take with the rook due to the pin. And if I play a move like, let's just say queen e3, there maybe are ideas like bishop a6, or even moves like queen a1. And this queen on a1 is really, really well placed here. And while this is winning in a blitz game or rapid game where the time's getting really low, it's very easy to make a mistake here with all these issues in the position. Fortunately, I found this very nice move, knight c6, an in-betweener, attacking the queen on d8, and now after queen d6, I trade, and I have this very nice move, knight to b4, and now the idea is very simple. I just want to go a6 and end the game. So he plays queen a1 here, I go a6, he takes, really the only move, I take, and now I cannot win the rook because of the pin here, but I have rook c8 here, attacking the knight on e8, which is also pinned. If black plays rook a8, trying to salvage the knight, now I go b7, and I will make a new queen and win the game. So he plays queen b1. At this point, the game is over, but he's playing on, obviously, we're a little bit low on time, and you hope for a miracle. So I take, King h7 is played. I go rook to b8, simply guarding the pawn on b6. Rook a1, and now I play this move h5. Now, the reason I play h5 is very simple. If we look at this position, let's just say I play a move like rook d8 just to illustrate it. If we get to this position, while white is better here, this is a very tough endgame to win with the 4 versus 3. I actually had this, I think, in Sturbridge, Connecticut when I played the... I played a tournament, maybe it was Continental Open, I don't remember what the tournament was, against Alexander Shpunski all the way back, I think in 2003 or 2004. And I remember winning that game, but it was very, very difficult to win the 4 versus 3. So, of course, I just play rook b8. I don't want to allow that. Rook a1 and h5, because now the problem is that even if black can win the pawn, let's just illustrate it again. Let's say we get some position like this. I can always go bishop d3 check. If g6, this is a very simple win. And if black has to play f5 in a position like this, I can just go rook e8. And these pawns are super, super weak on e6 and f5, and it'll be a very clean technical win. So that's why I played h5 here. He goes queen b5. I go rook to c8, goes rook b1. Worth noting, rook d8 would actually be a massive blunder, because after rook takes f1, queen takes f1, queen takes b6, I would lose the rook and be down a pawn in a queen and pawn endgame, and this would be a heartbreak, which would be sort of reminiscent of what I was doing yesterday. Instead, I play rook c8. Now, of course, rook f1 takes queen b6. The rook is on c8, so it's not under attack, and I can go queen f2. So he plays rook b1. I make a check, he goes f5, and now I go back to f2, because if black takes on b6 here, as in the other variation, I can just go rook to e8, followed by bishop c4, and this will be a very straightforward win with an extra bishop. So he plays rook to a1, now I go rook to c2, rook b1, and I go rook to e2. Obviously not the absolute precise way of approaching it, but I knew that if he has to take the pawn on b6, it's just a very simple technical win. One line would be takes, 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 and then rook to e5, king to g8, trying to get over, but after bishop c4, king f7, I can just snap the pawn at f5 due to the pin, go back to e5, and it's a very simple win. So he plays e5 here. Now I go b7. He has to take. I take on e5, and the dust is really settled here, and it's just a very simple win. He plays queen f7. I go queen c2, attacking the rook and the pawn. Plays queen a7. I go king h2. And here he plays queen b8. If he were to take the bishop on f1, now I have queen f5 check. And after king h8, there's rook e8 mate. Same goes for king g8, exact same thing. And if g6, I just take and then play rook e8 checkmate again. So he plays queen b8 here. I take with check. King g8, make the check, and he resigns in view of the fact that after king to h8, I can now go bishop d3, attacking the rook on b1, but also lining up the battery checkmate with queen h7 next move. So with that, I win the 6th game. I scored 2.5 points out of 3. I think I'm currently tied for, I believe, 4th place, half a point out of 2nd, 1.5 points out of 1st place, with only 3 rounds to go and trailing Nihal Saran by so many points. I don't think it's realistic to expect to win the tournament, but if I play well tomorrow, I can maybe finish with a respectable showing and get up to 2nd place. Now, one thing that's very interesting about this event, forgetting about my own trials and travails, and is that it feels to me like a lot of players are having very choppy up and down tournaments. I would have said before the event, the 3 players who I thought were most likely to win this event, or the players who can play at the highest quality, would have been myself, Wesley So, and Noterbek Abdussatorov. Now, as it turns out, I currently have 3 points, and I'm tied for 4th place. But Wesley and Noterbek have 2.5 points. They have a half point less than me after 6 rounds. They're both struggling mightily. So it's been a very interesting event because I would have said that they would have been the favorites too. So all 3 of us have not played great chess. But at any rate, I'm happy with my result today, and hopefully I can continue to play well tomorrow. At any rate, I'm going to go eat a little bit of dinner. I'm probably going to pass out very soon because I still am jet lagged. But at least today went well, and I hope you guys enjoyed the recap. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below, and hopefully I'll do more recaps in the coming days here from Kolkata, India. All right, bye.